Let's get to it. Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be back with you my second time today. I don't often jump on two Substacks, but my first one, I was interviewing my friend and constitutional law professor and scholar, Kim Whaley, about the shadow docket. If you have a minute, you can go back and watch the video. She's terrific. She really is terrific. I highly recommend her Substack page. But today I want to talk about two things, primarily the new Maureen Comey lawsuit. Makes me smile that Maureen Comey, federal prosecutor who was unlawfully and unconstitutionally fired. Some people ask, how can you be unlawfully and unconstitutionally fired? And the answer may not be intuitive, but you can be unlawfully fired if your termination violates a federal statute, and you can be unconstitutionally fired if your constitutional rights to, for example, due process of law, when you're being fired, you often there are notice and opportunity to be heard requirements attendant to firing, particularly federal government employees. So you can be unlawfully and unconstitutionally terminated, or the government can act against you in both an unlawful and unconstitutional way. So I'm going to try to scroll up as we're doing this so I can kind of keep up with y'all. So Maureen Comey filed a lawsuit against Pam Bondi, against the Department of Justice, against the Office of the Presidency, and others for being unlawfully and unconstitutionally fired. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute and what I think might really be going on here, why she was fired on July 16. And we're going to talk about what happened 6 days later on July 22nd that I think provides a clue to why she was fired. But let me start with just a few minutes about Kash Patel, who is dangerously unfit to lead the FBI. And the reason I want to circle back to Kash Patel, we've talked about him quite a bit, his incompetence, his imbecility, his recklessness. But he just went on Fox, and I know this because I just did a video with my friend and partner in the Legal Breakdown, Brian Tyler Cohen, and we touched on this. He brought it to my attention. Kash Patel went on Fox and he doubled down on his own incompetence. You know, even when he's wrong, he's wrong. He's like doubly wrong. And the explanations and excuses he tries to give are wrong on top of being wrong. Dude is wrong. So here's what he just said on Fox. He said, when I posted that, we had a suspect in custody, I was being transparent. Nobody's more transparent than me when it comes to running the FBI. And friends, can I tell you why he's wrong on top of wrong? When a criminal investigation is in its infancy, I mean, literally in the hours after the crime was committed, transparency is not a thing. You don't transparently announce everything that's going on in a pending criminal investigation that's going a mile a minute when you're trying to find a killer, when you're trying to unravel what the hell happened, when you're in virtual hot pursuit, if not actual hot pursuit. Transparency is anathema to a pending investigation that is in its infancy. Why? Because when you transparently start telling the public everything that's going on in a fresh criminal investigation, you're doing what? You are informing the bad guy about what's going on, what you know, what you don't know, so the bad guy can make decisions like, oh, I got to start tampering with witnesses. I've got to start destroying evidence. I've got to flee to avoid apprehension and prosecution. Transparency is not a thing in the infancy of a criminal investigation. So when he tries to justify his own incompetence, recklessness, and imbecility, he's wrong on top of wrong. Here's what he posted, and bear with me if did I tell you all, somebody please drop me a comment here. Did we talk previously about the third party perpetrator defense and how Kash Patel has made himself a star witness for the defense in the third party perpetrator defense that the actual gunman will now have? Yes. Okay. Then I'm not going to repeat myself. Thank you so much. This is why I love getting feedback in real time. I won't do it all again, but I do want to read Kash Patel's original post because when he was on Fox, he tried to downplay it. Well, I didn't really say, I just said we had a subject. Well, you didn't just say you have a subject, sport. Here's what you said. The subject for the horrific shooting today that took the life of Charlie Kirk is now in custody. And that ain't the gunman. That ain't the guy that they're going to put on trial. So, man, these words will be used against Kash Patel and the FBI and the federal government by the actual gunman's defense attorney. You're going to hear that like a mantra. The director of the FBI assured the American people and the entire world when he posted definitively, we have the gunman in custody. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That is not my client. Kash Patel was right the first time. They had the gunman in custody, and then they got it wrong. And now he wants you to believe that, no, don't believe what I said there. Believe what I'm saying here. Well, you know what? You should expect better from your government officials than that, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why you need to find my client not guilty, because Kash Patel was right the first time. He wouldn't have posted that if he didn't have definitive evidence that they had the gunman in custody. Well, of course he would, because he's an imbecile. But that's not the argument that the defense attorney is going to make. And as I've said before, friends, I guess you can't stop me once I get wound up. I repeat myself. I apologize. You don't need to win the hearts and minds of 12 jurors. You just need to instill a little bit of doubt, reasonable doubt in the mind of one of the 12 jurors. Now you've got a hung jury. Now you've got a mistrial. Courtesy of Kash Patel's recklessness, incompetence, and imbecility. And then he says, all in the name of transparency. And he's wrong again. Knucklehead. Okay, let's talk about Maureen Comey, because I love the fact that she sets out. I would urge you to read the first few pages of her newly filed lawsuit filed today. She sets out exactly what happened to her, how she was really a highly regarded, indeed a celebrated prosecutor of a decade at the Southern District of New York, United States Attorney's Office, the federal prosecutors in Manhattan. She prosecuted all sorts of high-profile cases. She successfully prosecuted Senator Bob Menendez, a Democrat, held him accountable for his crimes. She prosecuted Sean Diddy Combs, and some will observe that she didn't win convictions on all counts. So what? You know what? You try your case, you put it in the jurors' capable hands, and they make the decision. She prosecuted other high-profile cases, including public corruption cases, violent crime cases, and others. And of course, she successfully prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell, and she was the assigned prosecutor on the Jeffrey Epstein case before he turned up dead in a jail cell. I don't say killed himself, turned up dead in a jail cell. And she had gotten the highest possible rating as a prosecutor. Believe me, I had to fill out more evaluation reports for my prosecutors than I care to remember, and they are challenging to fill out. They're very cumbersome, but they're important. You want to make sure you give prosecutors their due, or if they need to come up to snuff in some aspects of their work, you need to make sure you document that. She was highly regarded. She was an outstanding performer by all accounts, and she was entrusted with some of the highest profile prosecutions in that office. Of course, her last name was also Comey. So that made her, I guess, an avowed enemy of Donald Trump, just like her father, former FBI Director James Comey, was Donald Trump's avowed enemy. But here's the most interesting part. Now, the lawsuit says that she was unlawfully and unconstitutionally fired without explanation, without reason, and contrary to her track record of excellence. Um, and interestingly, there's a Trump flunky who's the U.S. attorney, a guy named Jay Clayton, in that U.S. attorney's office. And according to the New York Times article, they asked him why she was terminated. And he said basically, I don't know. Washington did it. Interesting for him to take that position. And I wouldn't think that that would please Washington, Pam Bondi and Trump and company, but we'll see. Maybe he'll be introduced to the undercarriage of a bus sometime soon. That's what Donald Trump loves to do, right? Turn on everybody. Um, here's some of the most interesting aspects of this this situation. So in the court filing, Maureen Comey and her lawyers set out that she was on July 15th, she was assigned as lead counsel on a new public corruption case, obviously signaling that right up until July 15th, the leadership at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan held her in very high regard. She was a supervisor of two separate sections in her time as well. Um, that was on July 15th. They made her the lead counsel, lead prosecutor on a new public corruption case. And the next day, she was unlawfully, in my opinion, and according to the pleading, unlawfully terminated by Washington, by Pam Bondi and Trump, obviously. And those two things don't make sense, right? You're so highly regarded that you are designated the lead prosecutor on a new public corruption case, and the next day you're fired. So she was fired on July 16, 2025. 6 days later, Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former criminal defense attorney, now Deputy Attorney General, God help us all, Todd Blanche posts the following on social media. He's nothing but bad judgment, this guy. Here's what he posts 6 days after they wrongfully terminate Maureen Comey, the lead prosecutor in the Maxwell and Epstein cases. Quote, "Justice demands courage. For the first time, the Department of Justice is reaching out to Ghislaine Maxwell to ask, what do you know? At Pam Bondi's direction, I've contacted her counsel. I intend to meet with her soon. No one is above the law, and no lead is off limits." This guy's a flippin' clown. A clown. He's like play acting. So think about it. 6 days after they fired the lead prosecutor in Ghislaine Maxwell's case, Todd Blanche says, I will be the one to sit down with her. No lead will go uninvestigated. Then he proceeds to sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell. And if you've read the transcript or listened to the audio recording, she lies and she lies and she lies and she lies. She said, I did nothing wrong. Jeffrey Epstein did nothing wrong. Donald Trump did nothing wrong. The victims are a bunch of liars. We never sex trafficked them. We never did anything wrong. And Todd Blanche eats up her lies like a child. More lies, please, Ghislaine. More lies. And at the end of the first day of debriefing, he says, you've done a wonderful job. I'm paraphrasing. Good job today, Miss Maxwell. I look forward to more of your lies tomorrow. I'm being facetious now, but that's the tone of it. Not once does he confront her with the hard evidence of her guilt, of her crimes, of her sex trafficking. She's a hands-on perpetrator, according to the victims, who were believed by 12 jurors unanimously beyond a reasonable doubt, and they convicted her of those crimes. He doesn't even confront her with the evidence of her crimes. He accepts all her lies, and then he rewards her for those lies by sending her to a cushy club fed in Texas. That was 6 days after they wrongfully fired Maureen Comey, that he announced he would be having this meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell. And here's the thing, friends. Maureen Comey knows where the bodies are buried. Maureen Comey knows what's in the Epstein files. I'm saying the bodies are buried figuratively. I'm not suggesting this is a murder case, but she knows, excuse me, Maureen Comey knows all about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and the evidence and the Epstein files because she was the lead prosecutor. She's the only one, the only person in a position to sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell and understand instantly, based on her deep well of knowledge of the evidence in the case, instantly whether Ghislaine Maxwell was telling lies or not. And of course she was. Maureen Comey successfully prosecuted her, proved her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt of multiple crimes. So of course she was lying when she said she did nothing wrong and Jeffrey Epstein did nothing wrong. Of course she was lying, and Maureen Comey would have known that, would have confronted her. And frankly, I've been in hundreds of those kinds of meetings, not exactly those kinds, but when I'm talking with an aspiring cooperating witness, and you walk away from a liar. You don't listen to the lies, you confront the lies. And if you can't get them off the lies, moving in the direction of the truth, you walk away from them. You don't reward them, you don't thank them for providing you all those lies. That's the opposite of what prosecutors do, but that's what Todd Blanche did. So why did they fire Maureen Comey 6 days before Todd Blanche said, I will sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell? You know why. They didn't want her to be anywhere near Ghislaine Maxwell. And here's the thing, friends. I hope that this litigation, this lawsuit that was just filed by Maureen Comey against the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, the Office of the Presidency, and others, I hope it will begin to expose some of what's in the Epstein files, because that may become part of this litigation. I can't swear to it, but it may become part of this litigation. And I suspect one of the reasons they fired Maureen Comey is because if she started to appropriately disclose information that's in the Epstein files, not violating grand jury secrecy, but if she starts to disclose it as part of this litigation, you know what the Trump administration is going to say about her. She's an aggrieved DOJ prosecutor because she was fired, so now she's making up all these lies. That dog won't hunt, right? That dog will not hunt for anybody who's capable of critical thinking. But that may be one of the reasons they fired her. And let me leave you with this, friends. Maureen Comey worked as a federal prosecutor, yes, for 10 years, nearly 10 years, at the Southern District, New York, U.S. Attorney's Office. And she worked as a federal prosecutor for the first 6 months of Trump's second term. If the only reason he was firing her was because she was James Comey's daughter, could have fired her on January 20th or 21st. No, she continued to work there for 6 months. And it wasn't until right before they were going to sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell that they fired her. Do you really think that timing is a coincidence? I don't. And I do hope somehow this results in more of the Epstein files being disclosed by Maureen Comey or otherwise as part of this litigation of this new lawsuit that she just filed. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I think I've said more than enough about Kash Patel doubling down on his own incompetence and being wrong on top of wrong. And there are a couple other legal issues percolating that we'll probably save for tomorrow. But as always, friends, thank you for jumping on. And let's continue to be engaged in this fight. I was inspired when I talked to Kim Whaley today, and she repeated something that I think we've probably heard quite a bit about in recent months, and that is how if 3.5% of the population in a nation that's moving in the direction of dictatorship, 3.5% of the population can stand up and protest and march and rally and speak out, 3.5%, then we can topple the coming dictatorship. And Kim used a phrase that I think I'm going to hold fast to. Magic can happen. Not that it's going to take magic. It's going to take a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. But if we can get up to 3.5% of the people marching, rallying, protesting, standing up, staying strong, speaking out, magic can happen. Dictatorships have been toppled. Magic can happen, not with violence, but with making our voices heard. 3.5% of us. That's not too much to ask of all of us to get in there and hit that, as Just Dave said, hit that magic number. Magic can happen. Friends, thanks for jumping on with me tonight. I will be back here tomorrow night around 8:30ish, and we will see what fresh hell tomorrow holds in store on the legal front. Enjoy the rest of your night.